Great. Ming, thanks for your time today. Great to see you and nice to speak. It'd be useful for people that don't know you if you could just say a few words about yourself, please.
Okay, thanks, Fraser. My name's Ming Tang. I'm the Director for Data and Analytics for NHS in England and Improvement. So really leading all our work in the analytical area and also all the data assets that we produce nationally.
Wow, so it's a small job.
Yeah, great job.
Excellent. I want to start with a question that's maybe almost too obvious, given your role, given your remit, given your history in this area. But just if you could just give me your reflections on why analysis is so important within health and social care.
I think in health and social care, we've got a huge opportunity to better use the information that's available to us to make analytical decisions. So at the moment we have lots and lots of data, probably a lot more data than a lot of other health organisations, national health organisations. So why analysis? It's just really vital that becomes the lifeblood of how we make decisions and how we use those information assets to actually inform different scenarios of how we would like to improve. And I think at the moment it's quite difficult to do that because the information is quite siloed, analysts are quite siloed, and actually part of our journey that we need to go on is how do we link those information assets with the people and the decision makers. So I think we're on a bit of a journey of very much cross-working and bringing together the assets and the analysis with the decision makers.
That's fantastic. I also guess, and many of the issues you picked up I want to ask you more fully about in a moment, but I also guess the context you've just described there is also changing because of the availability, the supply of data must only be increasing at the moment given digitalisation.
Yeah, so quite interestingly, we've been through a number of years of information governance and everyone's quite risk averse about information governance. I think with the technologies that we've actually got an opportunity to manage the privacy concerns of individuals with actually the utility of that data. And I think we mustn't lose the utility of the data while we manage the privacy concerns. So balancing that technology is going to help us. I mean, I'm really on the charge to democratize data, to make it available to those that need it, when they need it, and how they want to use it. I think where we're really trying to charge with nationally is to make sure that we have common ways of viewing data and also creating analysis. So very much along the standards, making sure there's a common, ontology or way of looking at data, so that we're comparing apples and apples and pears. Otherwise, it just creates a very rich dialogue, but actually not a very usable decision-making dialogue.
Excellent. And I want to ask you about decision making, in particular. When I asked you about the value of analysis, you were referring to getting data, insight, analysis, intelligence into the hands of decision makers. So how well used do you think analysis currently is within the system? I'm also conscious of asking you this at a time when, data and analysis and models are on the front page, aren't they? But, so sort of how well are we doing, do you think, as a system in making best use of analysis?
So since we're bang in the middle of the COVID crisis, I think analysis is being used to support decision making really well. I would say, pre-COVID, we probably weren't using it as well as we could. And actually, it was actually quite hard for aspects of the business to actually use data in a dynamic way to inform their decision making, mainly around the timeliness of that information, also the depth that they would need to, the complexity of the health service as it is, and any analysis we do in order to do either modelling or detail analysis, we either oversimplify with assumptions, or actually the data is not available for us to do that level of sophistication. What we've learnt in the time for COVID is actually being a bit more precise about the question that you're trying to answer means that we can actually then, the analysts can actually say, well, we've got this data, but not that data. We could answer this question in this way. And in order to make it a better and that piece of analysis, we'd also need to supplement it with X, Y, Z. I think being able to have that dialogue has been immensely helpful, and actually being on the front foot of actually understanding why that question's being asked has been enormously helpful. So if I was to say, what do I want going forward, is actually having analysts at the table to actually start understanding the context in which the analysis has been used, because how many of us, so often we're being asked to do things where we didn't really understand why, and we create the analysis and then people are disappointed. But if we spent a bit more time framing the question, understanding the key question, understanding the context in which that question is being asked and how that answer is going to be used, both those two things then make the analysis both much richer, more appropriate, and then support decision making. And that's not an analytical issue, it's how we manage the business process against that and how we insert people within the either transformation streams or the business operational streams to be better users of data and better users of how they ask a question. So that's an education point in itself.
No, that's fascinating. I mean, the other thing, I mean, there's a general backdrop to there will be things that we've done in the pandemic as an analytical community to equip decision makers that we will now not want to lose. And I will definitely ask you in a bit about what you would wish for going forward, but I take all of your points. You're describing very largely a change in the dynamic between decision maker or question asker and the analyst as someone who can support them in answering those questions. Yeah. That's one of the things that you detect at the moment, a shift in that.
I think there's two shifts. One shift is around the data and the way that the technology supports data being used in a more timely and dynamic manner, which automatically creates opportunities to ask different questions. The other big change that's necessary is having analysts support business users in a way that the business users don't feel fearful. So in some ways, it takes the analysts away from being the experts to being business partners and actually supportive of actually being a bit more inquisitive ourselves, being a bit more supportive of, it's not a dumb question, it's actually why is someone asking that question, because there is something that's missing, either in their knowledge, understanding, or actually we haven't presented the data in a way that's digestible. So some of this is about how we produce analysis and how we tailor analysis to answer questions, and the accessibility of that if you don't have an analytical brain or you're not used to looking at data, and therefore what our role of analysts need to be to change in order to support some of that.
That's great, and I want to ask you then about the role of the analyst in the analyst workforce. I mean, to what extent do you think we make good or best use of the analytical workforce that we currently have in the health and social care system?
If I was being really brutally honest, I think we do a disservice to our analysts. If you look at people coming into the service, very young, bright graduates who starry-eyed and have the world as their oyster, we probably give them really dumb things to do. They're cleansing data, they're doing a lot of the data wrangling because we don't have the tools and techniques, and to be honest, the standards to do a lot of those things so that it's done as a factory rather than has bespoke pieces of work, and therefore we take up all the time doing the wrangling and not enough time thinking about the questions and their analysis. So I think we do a disservice. Having said that, I think the analysts also need better communication skills, better openness to actually understand the business that they're within. So I think some more cross-working being embedded within frontline businesses so that they can actually understand the context in which the analysis is being required is really important too.
That's really interesting. So your sort of first reflection is we recruit these people who are so hard to find, who are rare, who have this set of skills that actually elsewhere in the labour market and increasingly elsewhere in the labour market can command really quite high salaries because they're so rare, because they're so valuable. So we recruit these people and then we dull them. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, we do. We dumb them down.
And we don't sharpen their technical skills enough. And then the other thing you were saying is that perhaps we've got, historically at least, and I'll take your point, maybe this is changing, have had them too far from the people using the results of what they do, so they don't then develop that set of skills to understand questions, to communicate results.
Yeah, we prize too much analytical skills and data techniques. We prize that more than we prize domain knowledge and understanding. And I think the analysts of the future need to have both. You need to be able to contextualize the domain by which the context for which your analysis is being used, but also the skills and understanding so that you bring the most appropriate methodologies and standards to that analysis. And there's nothing wrong with doing something quick and dirty, because actually that's what you need. If we're always prizing for the most accurate solution or the statistically valid solution, that doesn't always help when actually the business is looking for something rough and ready. But we're not able to move between the two readily and anticipate the need to go from a top-down, quick-level view to actually something that's really accurate and standardized. We need to build bridges between those two views of life. Yeah,
that's fascinating. And again, I'll ask you in a moment what it is that you think needs to change in order to make the world that you're describing a bit more of a reality. I guess one of my reflections is that that's quite a rare combination of skills, isn't it? That technical aptitude and the ability to guide someone through structuring problems and then communicating the results and working. They are a rare set of people. And I wonder about the role of people who can do that as leaders within the analytical community as well.
I think it would be fantastic if we had people that did have that view become more leader, move out of the analyst world into more leadership roles, because they're our user community who can actually help bridge the difference. It's much easier working for a finance director who's got an analytical background, or somebody that's had an economics or a OR background. It's so much easier because you can have that dialogue. It doesn't tend to be. So I think there's something about us helping analysts broaden the spectrum of their careers so that it's not always just the expertise of analysis, but it's the expertise across domains, and actually building that up as they go through their careers, actually forcing that combination or encouraging that combination to some extent is helpful. We all moan, don't we, that we spent ages training that person and they went off somewhere else, but that to me should be welcomed, because actually what you're doing is breeding the next business person of the future who can be that better customer. So we should actually anticipate that and plan for it.
No, that's fabulous. Okay, I've kept saying I'm going to ask you what you would want in order to do differently. So just let me do that. In order to push on some of the things that you've described, you've pointed to a few things and said, look, that's great. Let's keep it. Let's accelerate it. Let's develop it. In order to do things like that, in order to make better use of analysis, and in order to bring about a better use of the analytical workforce, what would you do? What kind of things would you be suggesting?
I think there are some foundational things. Actually having a technology platform that allows you to share standardized data sets, make the data engineering something that is available to analysts. Actually training some analysts to appreciate the data engineering would be a good thing too, so that they can understand the foundations of how those components come together. Being very I think trying to have cross-working teams very early on in an analyst's career to make sure that they work together on solving business problems rather than being told to do X towards a problem will help them understand context and ask the right questions and start understanding where value is added. Because part of what the journey is, how do we get people to understand where the value add is? The value add is not the 7 degrees of decimal places of the analysis. The value add is actually how that rough number is helping support a business decision, and then if that business decision needs to be true, how do you shore up that number quite quickly and make sure that analysis is embedded so that you can record where the savings are and the business realization. So that's kind of the journey that we need to. So that's both an education thing, an infrastructure thing, and also a business process and ways of working. And I don't think in this world you can do one of those legs and succeed. You've got to do all of it together. Our challenge is, how do we now interact with business owners so that we embed the teams with them so they can start understanding that context more broadly. I think, you know, for us to run analysis as more federated teams that are embedded in the business, it's got to be one of the ways forward, and have the central core think about capability development, training, you know, placements, scheduling, what are the key questions, and how do we resource analytical support for certain businesses so that they get the answers that they need and they get the resourcing that they need.
That's fascinating. There's so much in what you say. I struggle to sort of pick something to ask you a bit more about. The question about where the sort of value add from the analyst comes, I think, is a fascinating one, and it's also in the way you were describing it as well. It's not obvious. Sometimes when I watch colleagues at the strategy unit, the analytical colleagues, engage with decision makers, often they don't do anything that you would describe as technically. It's just the way they structure problems.
Yeah.
So there's something in that,
yeah,
isn't there?
Yeah. So I've lived for a long time. For me, strategy isn't a thing. It's a way you think. And I think similarly, analysis isn't a thing. It's a way that you structure the problem, and how you then work your way through the decision tree as to how you answer that problem. You know, how you present the answer to that problem so that you're actually answering the question in the first place. So the techniques around analysis and the competency around doing good analysis, statistical analysis in particular, is really important. Actually understanding how you profile data to make sure that you're not using the wrong statistical technique is absolutely important. But a lot of analysis doesn't require that level of rigor. A lot of analysis is about how you think and frame the question, and then dissect that question. It's a scientific way of thinking, isn't it? So that you can decompose the question to answer it, and actually play detective in terms of where are the data sets that will allow us to answer that question, and how complete is that answer? Is it the probability of 100%, or is it actually we're only giving you a 40% question, so therefore the probability of that answer being totally correct is X. So framing all those things is a thinking skill. It's a mindset change. It's not necessarily, you're not going to learn that by doing more maths. It's just not. It's not going to.
You're not. And then the other thing that it was making me think is that mode of thinking is available to the non-analyst as well. That way of going at it can kind of be passed on.
And you know, when I worked in consulting, that's why actually taking recruitment, actually we always went for engineers, because in a lot of ways it's a scientific thinking, and actually the problem solving that you're looking for, you can teach them the skill sets necessary in order to do that job. And because they're not so wedded to I'm a statistician, or I'm OR, or I'm X, it's actually easier for them to float between the different fields of analysis, and then actually appreciate bringing in the experts who can bring that expert view as and when you need it. Yeah,
that's great. The other thing in what you were saying that I want to just ask you a little bit more about, you were describing, I think, a world in which analysts were sort of better networked and were working more cross-discipline together. There was much more fluidity, I think, in the way you were describing the use of analytical resource. Just say a wee bit more about that.
So I think in order for us to make strong business decisions, value add business cases, understand where the value chain is, we absolutely need analysts working alongside the business in cross-functional teams. And that's going to be across either disciplines of different analytical flavors, as well as people that can come and who understand, clinical transformation, who understand strategy views, of people that understand how to negotiate a commercial outcome. You know, if you think about a transformation change, you need all of those blended skill sets in order to solve a problem. So the analyst should be a component of that blended team. Or too often what you have is a blended team, and then someone pops out the question to the analyst who are sat in the corner, not really involved in any of the discussions, but expected to provide the perfect business case to support that situation. So we absolutely need the analyst sitting alongside those teams in order to understand it. Yeah, it's a domain knowledge really, as well as the techniques.
No, that's excellent. The final thing I want to ask you then, because I'm conscious of time, is, you know, what in sort of fairly precise or quite concrete terms, what do you think the next steps are towards the world that you've described? From where we are now to where we would want to get to in the way you describe it? You know, what are the sort of next practical things to do?
I think coming out of COVID, there is an absolute recognition that having analysts embedded in the programme teams, particularly from out of NHSEI work anyway, has been a valuable experience. We are now basically allocating analytical leads into the regions to support the regions and understand what the needs are so that they've got that contextual domain knowledge. I think the next thing is analysts within those domains connecting with each other so that we make sure we don't duplicate, that we're making the best use of those resources, that we're all helping each other answer the questions, because we'll bring different aspects to that, and having some functionality and tooling or a network to support that is the most important thing. And that can be done as fluid as a Kanban board for a program, or it could be actually much more rigorous as Midlands and CSU were providing from the DSU perspective. So any of those activities are important. And I think, again, with COVID, having the think tanks all together to think forward is a really important thing, and we wouldn't want to lose those types of activities as well.
No, definitely. It could be a shame if some of these things slid back. I mean, so many of us are going, if only we were doing this before. So it'd be great if we could keep the best of what we've innovated, what we've devised in the face of the crisis.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, Ming? That's the end of the set of questions that I had for you.
I'm really encouraged by where we've got to, and actually I think the technology has actually caught up with all the things that we want to do. So I don't think the constraint is the technology or the data, to be honest. I think the constraint now is whether behaviourally we want to adopt these new ways of working. So my leaving stance and kind of ask is of all the analyst community is think about what you've enjoyed during the last few weeks, months from the COVID, and how you've responded to that, and build that into your daily way of working, and make sure you keep those networks fresh so that we can build on this when we come out, because this is going to be a 2-3 year thing. We want to maintain what's good and keep that and build on it going forward.
That's excellent. Listen, Ming, thank you ever so much for your time. I've really enjoyed interviewing you, and I look forward to seeing you at our event.
Thank you.